We just went live, Dan.
Cool. Now, can you as well, or just me?
Both you and I are live, and we'll probably wait a minute or two to allow people to join us, and then get started.
Cool.
So it's noon, so why don't we get started? Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Menser. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Director of Communications for Open Invention Network. Keith and I are really excited about today's OIN Hangout. Dan McCurdy has been a long-standing friend of Open Invention Network, and he's well known for his efforts to counteract patent trolls through his work at Allied Security Trust, at Patent Freedom, and most recently at RPX and RPX OPEN. RPX OPEN helps to de-risk us all from patent trolls. It's free, and we've had a number of OIN community members join RPX OPEN already. So we wanted to get the word out to everybody else about RPX OPEN, and we're really pleased to have Dan McCurdy here to present on it. In terms of questions, if anyone who is watching via the YouTube feed has any questions, we would ask that you email in your questions to info@openinventionnetwork.com. If you are watching this presentation through Google+, the OIN Google+ events page, we'd ask that you either post your questions on the events page, or you can use the embedded Q&A app, and we'll answer those questions as well. So with that, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dan, for the presentation.
Great, thanks Ed, very much, and welcome everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. As Ed mentioned, I have been a great supporter of OIN, and Keith and I have spent many hours talking about how OIN could continue to help the industry, just as many of us have been trying to help reduce the risks that are posed by non-practicing entities. And so what I'm going to talk with you about this afternoon, or for those of you in other time zones this morning, is what we call the Open Patent Exchange Network. But before I turn to that, I thought I would spend a few minutes just bringing you up to date on some new information that we continue to collect and analyze with respect to the ongoing challenges that we all face from non-practicing entities. So if you give me just one moment, I'm going to bring up the actual presentation, and Ed, if you would just be kind enough to make sure that it's showing properly.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So as many of you have
actually, Dan, it's not up yet.
Okay. All right. Just give me one second. Let's go back and try this one more time. Let's try and see if we get it now.
There you go.
Excellent. So, as many of you have experienced, over the last 30 years, the NPE problem has gotten tremendously more significant, and in fact has grown more than 500 times during this period. And as many of you also know, this happened primarily after the dot-com bubble burst in 2001, 2002. And what you can see on this chart is this growing bar here was the first sort of significant onslaught of the growth in 2005. And it was caused by this convergence between investors who were petrified of a stock market where the NASDAQ on the US had dropped by more than 78% in value, with a loss of more than $9 trillion in market cap between the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. So you had this convergence of very scared investors who didn't know where they could put money, and this belief that with all of these patents coming out of the dot-com boom, it may be possible to invest in the enforcement of patents, and thus began this very, very rapid rise that we've seen over the last decade or so in the amount of NPE activity, which has, of course, spurred many of the defensive organizations such as OIN, AST, RPX, Patent Freedom, and so on. And while many people talk about obviously those companies that have very, very high revenues in areas that are easier to enforce against than other kinds of product areas, what we also know is that more than 2,000 distinct companies were sued in 2014. And while we hear frequently about those in this upper right quadrant, Samsung and Apple and AT&T and Microsoft and Google and HP and Sony and so on, who get sued very, very frequently, some of them as often as once a week, there are also these, almost 2,000 companies that sit down that get sued much less frequently, but when they do, it still causes significant cost and disruption to the companies. Some of us believed, and when I would speak around the world in 2014, there was this frequent belief that perhaps with all of the changes that had been made in public policy and with the efforts that many of us have worked so hard on, that finally the war was being won, because the number of total defendants that were added to NPE campaigns and the total number that had been challenged by NPEs in 2014 actually fell. And unfortunately, what we can see in 2015 is that it's actually a fairly steady state over the last half a decade or so, where there are approximately 4,000 defendants that are added to NPE campaigns each year. And it just so happened that 2014, for reasons that we could all speculate on, was a down year, but we seem to be right back in that norm of the last half decade or so. And there used to be a belief that it was restricted. The activities were very restricted to just a couple of industry sectors. But what we all know now is that the only thing the NPE is really after is your money. And as long as there is a business that arguably is using patents, or there's a credible argument that they are allegedly using patents that are held by an NPE, no industry is immune. And while we've seen obviously a very significant growth in the number of e-commerce and software claims that had been made, even in 2014 post-Alice, it will be interesting to see how that changes. But regardless, what we know is that the NPEs are amazingly adaptable and will continue to adapt to whatever public policy and court obstacles, legal obstacles that are imposed by the courts that come their way. The next piece that I wanted to focus on is, I know that that many of the clients of OIN are smaller companies, and we hear and read a lot about the challenges that large companies face, because they tend to be the ones that get these exceptional, at least initial verdicts. But what this chart shows you is that if you look at the number of unique NPE defendants that are named, actually more than 60% of the companies, of the unique defendants that are named, are companies with revenues of less than $100 million. So yes, it's true that we hear a lot about companies that have 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or $100 billion being sued a lot. But the fact is, for those of you who are or with smaller companies, even one lawsuit every few years by an NPE against a small company can be extraordinarily disruptive. And if you're small enough, many of the companies, in fact, have less than $10 million a year in revenue, and having to spend $500,000 to several $1 million to defend even against one NPE lawsuit every couple of years can certainly be crippling, if not fatal. And this is the reason that we pay so much attention to this. We also know that almost 3/4 of the companies that are sued are privately held companies, not publicly held companies. And the bars on the right obviously just show you that this is the total number of defendants as opposed to the unique number of defendants. And of course, this number begins to change somewhat because the largest companies get sued, as I said earlier, very frequently. It's really, I think, the left-hand bars that are the number of unique companies that are much more indicative of the scope of the NPE problem. This one, I just want to quickly say that we frequently hear about the largest NPEs, IPNAV and Marathon and Acacia and so on. And so if you look at the top 10 NPEs by the number of cases that they filed in 2014, it's obviously a lot of cases. The scary part about that, though, is that if every one of these companies disappeared, it still would leave almost 3/4 of the cases being filed by one of the almost 1,000 parent NPEs that still exist. And so the problem is highly diverse. It's not focused on just a few significant NPE players, but rather highly dispersed, which means that the resolution to the problem can't be really directed one by one at every NPE, but rather it's a systemic problem that has to be addressed by a broader scope, which is why we created the Open Patent network so that there could be much greater visibility in these open patent exchanges. So couple of other pieces, and then we'll turn directly to the open program as a solution. This many of you might find interesting. Even though there are tens of thousands of patents that are held by NPEs, most NPEs only assert 1 or 2 patents in any given case. And interestingly enough, when they purchase patents, the vast majority of the transactions that occur when in the purchase of patents by NPEs are less than 5 patents, with the most significant number being only 1 or 2 patents in any given transaction, any given purchase transaction. Now, this slide, as we begin to move now toward a discussion of open, really gets to the heart of the problem. So many operating companies obviously are tremendously concerned and have been for more than a decade with the challenges that are presented to them by NPEs. But what is also true is that if you look at 2014 NPE litigations, in more than 70% of the patents that were the basis of those litigations, those patents originally were owned by an operating company. And so the challenge that we face is that companies are increasingly under pressure to reduce costs and to find ways to monetize a patent portfolio that they have invested heavily in. And yet, this creates what what Dan Lang, the Vice President of Intellectual Property at Cisco, has called a circular firing squad, where operating companies are selling to NPEs. The NPEs then sue other operating companies. Those operating companies then sell patents, and this cycle of this circular firing squad continues, which is damaging, really, in the end, only to the operating companies, because we're the ones that are footing 100% of the bill by both the plaintiff as well as the defendant, since virtually all, more than 75% of NPE cases are actually settled with money being paid by the operating company to the NPE. And so this takes us to sort of, who is selling. And not surprisingly, since a great deal of the innovation that occurs worldwide occurs within small companies, there just happen to be many small companies, particularly in the technology sector. More than 86% of the patents that have been used by NPEs actually come from companies with less than $500 million a year. And this, again, begins to speak to why both small companies and large companies need to provide more visibility when they intend to sell patents, particularly if the patents are going to go to an NPE. We're not saying that companies should not have the right to sell their patents. We think that they should. We also would say that operating companies, other operating companies, as long as they are given that transparency, that visibility to patents being sold, have an obligation to consider whether or not these patents may be problematic for them, and if so, to seek a license or to participate as a potential buyer, whether alone or through some consortia, including syndications like those that RPX offers in its base business. It's important that they have, as long as they have that opportunity, they need to take the opportunity, or obviously they potentially will suffer the consequences of not addressing it once they had the visibility and the chance to address the matter. What this particular slide looks at is NPE patents that were asserted, and the sources of those. So these are NPE litigations in 2013 against RPX member companies. And what you see from this on the left is that about half of the patents in that year that were asserted against RPX clients, of which there are approximately 200 core clients, about half of those were provided to them by an operating company. That is, the operating company sold it to the NPE. And more disturbing, to get to this visibility question that OPEN seeks to address, is that almost 80% of those were never seen on the open market. So, almost all defensive organizations today, OIN, AST, RPX, they monitor extraordinarily carefully what is being sold on the open market to see if they may be threatening to their members, so that they can then act accordingly to try and license or intercept these patents to avoid future litigation for their clients. But that said, if almost 80% of them are never seen, none of these defensive organizations and none of their member companies, or frankly any other company, has the ability to try and immunize themselves, where if they knew about these private transactions from an operating company to an NPE before the transaction was consummated, obviously they could ask the seller whether, before they sell it to an NPE, that whether they're willing to provide them with a license under mutually agreeable terms, or perhaps whether they're willing to allow that company or a collection of companies to bid for those patents, which obviously can only be good for the seller, since competition generally will drive the price up. This, this just demonstrates that that there are certain NPEs, and these are the leading NPEs in terms of the number of campaigns that they have based on patents that are acquired from operating companies. And if you look to the far right, you can actually see the percentage of the lawsuits that they do file that have been based on acquired patents where an operating company was the original owner. Now, the bottom box is noteworthy, because what it tells you is that even though this is a huge number of transactions, that the top 15 NPEs that are represented here still only account for about 20% of the campaigns that use patents that were sold to them by operating companies. So it truly is the tip of the iceberg, again, which is why a large effort needs to be brought to bear on getting much greater visibility into these sales, so that we have a chance to act. And this is just a small list which extends for thousands, and this is are some of the leading companies who have operating companies who have sold patents to NPEs. And what you see on the right-hand side are the campaigns that have been launched, and the NPEs that have launched those campaigns based on the patents that were acquired from these operating companies. And they are clearly worldwide. There are Asian companies that are actively selling. There are European companies, and there are North American companies that are selling to NPEs. Again, I want to emphasize this isn't necessarily a bad thing to sell. What we're trying to do, though, is if there is an intent to sell potentially to an NPE, to make sure that other companies that might be potentially impacted down the road are aware of those sales before an agreement is actually reached. And this is just a representation of that circular firing squad problem that we've already discussed. I mentioned earlier that about 3/4 of the cases involving an operating company defendant against an NPE result in payment made to the NPE. And this is a quick view of that comes from the RPX cost NPE cost report, which you can get at on the RPX, a summary of it on the RPX site. But what it shows you is that even though the median, the middle of the thousands of data points that we've received shows just under $500,000 in total costs. What we also know is that there are obviously the outlier cases where tens of millions of dollars are paid, and obviously this occurs most frequently when the company has billions of dollars of exposed revenue. Regardless, it's still an expensive proposition that in most cases is somewhere between it's $500,000 and several $1 million in costs, the majority of which actually goes to the legal community, unless the settlement amount is really huge. So you can see that if the cost to resolve is under $100 million, is under $1 million, which very significant number of NPE cases are, then the legal costs are about equal to the settlement costs, and as the settlement gets higher and higher, obviously the legal costs as a percentage are less. And the result of all of this is that based on these cost estimates through the cost study that RPX conducts, in 2012, we estimate about $12 billion was spent by industry on NPE litigation, and that number is likely to be increased in 2015 only because of the increased number of cases that were filed in 2015 over 2014. So just to summarize, and then we'll spend a minute or so a couple of minutes on how open actually works. The summary is very clear. Operating companies, for perfectly legitimate reasons, are increasingly selling patents, and they tend to sell them to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder is frequently an NPE in the way that the system operates today. Frequently, the reason that operating companies are selling these privately today is they aren't really seeking to sell patents, but an NPE, through its research, one or more, may call up the patent owner and ask them if they're willing to consider selling 1 or 2 or 3 named patents. And they tell them a price, and they think that sounds good, and they happen to need the money, and they sell the patents. And there really is no mechanism for them to conveniently be able to broadcast to other companies that this sale to an NPE might occur. And so, this obviously, particularly this private closed set of transactions make it amazingly inefficient. What we know, and you might find interesting, is that if we RPX, and it's true, of any organization, even an individual company, if we can intercept patents before they enter into litigation, the operating company members will save about 9 times the money. In other words, if they had to resolve by intercepting, they will, if the cost was going to be $100,000 to resolve it through pre-litigation purchase, the cost otherwise would have been nearly $1 million. And we know that if litigation occurs, we can still, through syndication, solving this problem on behalf of multiple companies, we can get them out of the litigation for about 1/3 of what it would otherwise cost them. But it shows you the tremendous leverage, more than 3 times the leverage in resolving the problem prior to litigation. And this is what obviously then drove us to create this open patent exchange network. As Ed mentioned, it's available to companies who belong to RPX, and it's available to companies that do not belong to RPX. The only requirement is they have to be operating companies engaged in the sale of products and or services to end user customers. The agreement for you to participate in Open, which is completely free, it costs absolutely nothing, is that the agreement is only 4 pages long. It's 2 pages long for the agreement and about 1.5 pages for definitions that are used in the agreement. Very simple, very straightforward, and what it's basically attempting to do is simple. What it says is that at least 45 days before you agree to sell a patent to an NPE, you will provide notice to OPEN, and OPEN will circulate a list of those patents to the other OPEN members, and they have the opportunity, but not the obligation, to contact the potential seller and say, before you do this, could you, would you be willing to discuss with us the possibility to get a license, or we might be interested in participating in the sale process, so we may be the buyer, either alone or with other OPEN members. And obviously for those OPEN members that are members of RPX, it wouldn't be surprising that they would contact RPX and say, would you consider buying these patents if they thought they were of interest? Would you consider buying these through funds that we've already provided you in our annual RPX subscription? So in fact, RPX has already done that, where there were notices given, and multiple RPX members asked us to step in and purchase the patents, and they did, and therefore these companies were licensed. So just to give you an update, we announced this program in February of this year, in late February. So far, there have been 26 participants to date that include companies like Cisco and Apple, ARM, Canon, and others, Intel, and we expect that will continue to grow as people get a better understanding of the tremendous benefits, sort of amazing benefits at no cost. The companies that are participating own more than 110,000 active US patents. They've been collectively sued by NPEs more than 125 times. They have transferred, many of them have transferred patents to NPEs in the past, and they all recognize that this madness just has to stop, and that this visibility and transparency will help to contain the arsenal that is the majority supplier, operating companies are the majority supplier to NPEs. And you can, if you are interested, you can go to www.rpxopen.com, and you can see a list of the current participants. We believe that that this is a great advantage for the potential buyers and licensees because of the ability to intercept before being sued. No one wants their first chance to see a patent when it's on a complaint that has just been served on them for a litigation that's been launched. And we also believe that it's good for the sellers, because a seller will benefit in multiple ways. One, it gives visibility so that others can potentially participate in the monetization process, which could drive a higher value to the seller. It also, some of the member companies have told us that one of the things they like about it most is that there has been, and there have been in the past, blowback from their willingness to sell patents to NPEs, where other industry participants, even suppliers or customers, have said, why in the world did you not let me know about this before you sold these patents? Because had you done so, we could have struck something that was reasonable and good for both of us. And now we're spending millions of dollars on your actions when you didn't even have the courtesy to tell me that you were contemplating this. And of course, what they said is, well, we would have been happy to, but we didn't know how to. We can't send out a blanket email to hundreds or even thousands of companies as the open network grows. And this provides the ability to do that in a completely safe environment, because one of the things that's built into our agreement is that there is a confidentiality provision so that only open members can know about this. And the reason for that in part is that it also provides a safe harbor such that each of the participants have agreed that they will not allege willfulness or for treble damages or file declaratory judgment actions and the like, or by way of example, IPRs based strictly on the knowledge that they have gained from open. It doesn't prevent them, obviously, if they have gained the knowledge through something other than open. But this provides a safe harbor where many companies have worries about trying to monetize their portfolio for exactly those kinds of potentially adverse actions. So the safe harbor has been very, very valuable. Last thing that I'll say about open, just so that you're aware, is that one of the questions is, well, how do you ensure that people actually will honor their obligation to provide this notice? And the consequence, and really the only consequence of open, is that if you become an open member, you promise that you will provide that 45 days notice, and if you fail to provide that notice and you transfer a patent to an NPE, each patent that is transferred by an open member without that notice is immediately licensed to all of the open members. So it doesn't mean that the NPE couldn't try and monetize the patent subsequently, but what it does mean is that they will have no ability to monetize that patent to an open member at the time of the transfer, because obviously they will all be licensed. And that's both the protection for the other participants, as well as the stick, if you will, to the seller, that they always make sure that if they're thinking about selling a patent, even if they don't know that it's going to be to an NPE, and you don't have to divulge, who you're potentially selling it to, but if you think it might be sold to an NPE, the prudent thing to do for all of these reasons is to provide notice so that other open participants have that visibility. And I've covered all of these things. With this, I will just close with a rather famous saying that's been used for various purposes, but I think open really is indicative of the fact that individually we are just a drop, but together we are an ocean. And OIN is an incredible demonstration of the power of companies coming together around a central theme to be able to accomplish great things. And we believe that this is complementary to many of the things that OIN stands for, and both would welcome and urge you to participate. In this last slide, I've given you the website once again, rpxopen.com, as well as my email address in the event that you have any questions. And with that, in case somebody can't read it but can hear it, dmccurdy@rpxcorp.com. And I'd be happy to have further conversations with you and or send you further materials and the open agreement if you're ready to sign up now. With that, Ed, I think that I will stop the presentation, and I will come back so that you can see my face. And if anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer those questions.
Thanks, Dan. So far, we've not had any questions for you, but perhaps we will hang out for about a minute or so and see if anyone submits any questions for you.
Okay. Maybe just as we wait, maybe we can just remind them of the best way to send the question in now that they've heard it in the event that they have one.
Right. So if you're watching from the YouTube feed, you should send in your questions to info@openinventionnetwork.com. if you're watching through the OIN Google Plus events page, you can post the question there, or you can use the Q&A app that's embedded within the OIN Hangout.
And I believe, Ed, that you will also circulate a link to the participants and the other OIN members in the event that they want to show this, either refresh their own memory or show it to their management. And I'm also fine, by the way, if anybody wants to contact you or me. We can also send them the deck that I presented today.
Okay. Yes. Well, once it takes a little bit of time for YouTube to process the video, but once the video gets processed, I will we'll share it with everybody, and that way they can go back and review the whole presentation. In addition, if anyone wants to reach out to OIN or to Dan at RPX Open, we can provide the presentations to you, or presentation singular to you.
Okay. Looks like people are being bashful, and that's okay. Yeah.
Bashful on a Wednesday, or Thursday, sorry. So Dan, thank you very much for your time and for the great presentation. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and for those of you, again, who either listened in the current or who see this subsequently, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Best of luck, and again, thanks to OIN, Ed, to you and Keith. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your time.
Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.